on relations and functions. Here we shall add functions, we shall subtract functions, we shall multiply functions, and we shall divide functions. How do we apply this? How do we apply this in real life? Let's take, for instance, in economics. Let's say you have a business or a firm, a company that produces items, produces goods. To produce an item, there is some cost involved, right? You have some costs involved in producing some items, and when you now want to sell that item, you want to sell it at a profit. You know, the aim of every business is to maximize profit and to minimize cost. That is the goal of every business. So you have some costs involved in producing the items or products. And when you want to sell that item or product, you want to sell at, you calculate your cost and you want to sell at a higher price so that you get some profit. Okay, so we have that the cost, let's say the cost is a function of the items you produced. And you have your revenue, so this means C of X, cost, okay, X is the number of items, or number of the products. C is the cost function, and the arrow is your revenue function. Because you want to sell the product you produced at a higher price so that you make some profit. So you talk about another function of X, which is a profit, P, profit. So we see that the profit is a function of X, the items you produce. The cost is also a function of X, the items you produced. The revenue is also a function of X, the items you produced. So we see that the profit function is the revenue function minus the cost function. So you have a situation whereby you have two functions of X that are subtracting themselves. One is being subtracted from the other. So likewise, you have other examples of real life situations whereby you might need to add functions, you might need to subtract functions, you might need to multiply the functions, and you might need to divide functions. That's why we are learning this. So this takes us now to operations on functions. Operations on functions. The first one, we have the sum function. Before we begin with the sum function, we can write this that given any two functions of X, say f of X and g of X, such that f of X and g of X are defined for all values of X, then we can now have a sum function Okay, the f of x and g of x must be defined for all values of x. Then these rules of functions will apply. The sum function is that f plus g of x is f of x plus g of x, and vice versa. Vice versa means that f of x plus g of x is f plus g of x. That's the way we pronounce it. That's the way we read it. Okay? Then we have the difference function. Difference function. We have that f minus g of x will give you f of x minus g of x. Such that, for instance, the profit function, profit P of x is equal to R of x revenue function minus the cost function C of x. We have the product function. Product function, which says that f times g of x is equal to f of x times g of x. Then we have the quotient function. Quotient function, which is that f divided by g of x is equal to f of x divided by g of x. Now this has a condition attached to it. The quotient function has a condition attached to it where g of x is not equal to 0. Okay, we want both f of x and g of x to be defined for all values of x. So g of x is not equal to 0. So we don't, in this case, this will exclude all values of x for which the g of x is not defined or undefined. These are the operation functions, rules of functions that we have, or you can say operations of functions that we have. So let's do some calculations then. Now, before you view this video, it is highly recommended that you know how to add and subtract variables. Basically, these operations of functions are just adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing variables. So it is highly recommended that you know your addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of variables, okay, before you continue with this video. I did a video on adding and subtracting variables, so you might want to view that video prior to viewing this. Alright, so we have 7 questions here, at least to make the video short. Okay, for the following functions, find the f plus g, f minus g, f times g, and f over g. Now, we just said f and g. You can use your own variable, you can use your own alphabets, m and n, you know, provided you write that they are functions of x. Okay, it must not be f and g. But here we are using f and g. And then later on we use h as well. So the first question, you have the f of x and the g of x. F of x is negative 4x plus 3. And then g of x is 7x plus 5. So you are asked to find f plus g. Okay, f plus g. Of course, this means what? F plus g of x means f of x plus what? G of x. So this will give us what? Negative 4x plus 3 plus 7x plus 5. Negative 4x plus 7x is what? 3x. 3 plus 5 is what? 8. So your answer becomes 3x plus 8. Then when you're asked to find f minus g of x, it is f of x minus g of x, and this will be negative 4x plus 3 minus, because this is a sum, this is not just one term, these are two terms, it's a sum, you have to put your parentheses, 7x plus 5. Okay? So this will be negative 4x plus 3 minus 7x minus 5. Right? Because you have to distribute. When you distribute, this is like saying that this is 1, negative 1. So negative 1 times 7x is negative 7x. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. And this will now be negative 4x minus 7x is negative 11x. 3 minus 5 is negative 2. So your answer becomes negative 11x minus 2. Then f times g of x means f of x times g of x. So this will give negative 4x plus 3 times 7x plus 5. So you just multiply the binomials. You can use the FOIL method, that's fine. Or any method you like. Particle method, you can also use particle method. This is negative 28x squared minus 20x plus 21x plus 15. Negative 28x squared minus 20x plus 21x plus 15. So this will now be what? Negative 28x squared plus x plus 15. Right? Then the next one, f divided by g of x, this gives f of x divided by g of x, and this will be negative 4x plus 3 divided by 7x plus 5. You cannot simplify this further, so you just leave it. Yeah, you just leave it like that. Alright, so that's for 1. Let's go ahead and do 2. 2 says f of x is 10x squared minus 2x, and g of x is 2x. So when we add this gives us what? 10x squared minus 2x plus 2x. And of course, minus 2x plus 2x is 0, so this is 10x squared. The answer becomes 10x squared. Then the subtraction difference function will be 10x squared minus 2x, then minus 2x. So this will be 10x squared minus 4x. The product function will be 10x squared minus 2x times 2x. So this will be 2x. Let's just write this first. 2x times 10x squared minus 2x. And that will give what? 20x cubed minus 4x squared. 20x cubed minus 4x squared. Then the quotient function will be 10x squared minus 2x divided by 2x. See whether you can factor by GCF, whether you can simplify the numerator. And yes, you can by factoring by GCF. So what's the GCF there is 2x. 10x squared divided by 2x is 5x. minus 2x divided by 2x is 1. All over 2x. So this 2x will cancel this 2x, and you now have 5x minus 1. Please, you have to make sure that you always simplify. You want to simplify to the least when you're doing any of these operations on functions. Okay. Question 3. Question 3 says f of x is x squared minus x minus 1. I'm trying to do varieties. Okay, I'm trying to do varieties. And then g of x is x squared plus 4x minus 5. Alright, when we now add this, the sum function will be x squared minus x minus 1 plus x squared plus 4x minus 5. Okay, let's open up the parentheses. This will be x squared minus x minus 1 plus x squared plus 4x minus 5. Right? Let me kind of draw this here. So x squared plus x squared is 2x squared. Minus x plus 4x is plus 3x. And minus 1 minus 5 is minus 6. And this becomes your answer. Then this difference function will be, we also have to be careful here for the difference function. This will be x squared minus x minus 1 minus, put your parentheses. I will advise you, right, whenever you have more than one term, whether you're adding or subtracting, it is good you put your parentheses. It is good, be on the safe side. Put your parentheses and do this step by step. If you do math step by step, it will be difficult for you to make a mistake. And even if you do make a mistake, you can easily find out the step that you made the mistake. But when you just do math, you do it mentally on your head, you skip several steps. When you do make a mistake, it's difficult to trace back that particular step that you made the mistake. So always write it down. Always, whatever you think about, write down. How about it? Now there is a stage you will now reach in math. You can now, do it well without writing down. When you reach like, okay, let's continue. So this is minus x squared plus 4x minus 5. Now, let's now open up the parentheses. This will be x squared minus x minus 1. Opening this up is like distributing negative 1. Distributive property. So when you do that, this is minus x squared minus 4x plus 5. Then you now do x squared minus x squared is gone, is 0. Minus x. Minus x minus 4x is minus 5x. Minus 1 plus 5 is plus 4. So your answer is minus 5x plus 4. And then multiplication, when you multiply product function, you have trinomial times trinomial. X squared minus x minus 1 times x squared plus 4x minus 5. Trinomial times trinomial. I hope you can, if you are confused on how to do this, I did a video on multiplying polynomials. That will help you, right? The way I usually do this is I do it step by step, so I don't make mistakes. I usually like doing it vertical method. So let me try to erase this. X squared times x squared times 4x, x squared times negative 5, negative x times x squared, negative x times 4x, negative x times negative 5. And of course, you know this will give me like 9 things when I finish. Negative 1 times x squared, negative 1 times 4x, negative 1 times negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So x squared times 4x is 4, x squared 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So x squared times x squared is x raised to the power 4. X squared times 4x is 4x cubed. X squared times negative 5 is negative 5x squared. Negative x times x squared is negative x cubed. Negative x times 4x is negative 4x squared. Negative x times negative 5 is 5x. Negative 1 times x squared is negative x squared. Negative 1 times 4x is negative 4x. Negative 1 times negative 5 is 5. So what you might want to do now is, after doing this, you don't want to mess it up. You want to gradually get the like terms, right? So we have, let me just draw a line here, x4, then plus 4x cubed. Then let's look for any other cube here, minus x cubed. Just please do not put your own sign. Just write it as it is. Don't come here and write plus minus x cubed. Stop making things complicated. When you have two signs together, make it one sign. When you have just one sign, don't try to make it two signs, please. Okay, make life easy. 4x cubed, just get it as it is. Okay, if you don't see any sign, it means plus. If you see minus, just write it as it is. Don't come and start writing plus minus. Okay, unless you're very good with that, you know, concept, keep change opposite. I mean, unless you're very good with it. Otherwise, write as is. Okay, 4x cubed minus x cubed. So the x cubed is gone. Then we have minus 5x squared minus 4x squared minus x squared. Okay, that one is gone. Then 4, 3, 2, 3, 2. Then plus 5x, because there's no sign here, it means plus. Plus 5x, then minus 4x, then plus 5. So you, after writing this, you want to count. You want to count it so you don't miss any term. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, we are good. So this is now x4, then 4x cubed minus x cubed is plus 3x cubed, minus 5 minus 4 minus 1. Minus 5 minus 4 is minus 9. Minus 9 minus 1 is minus 10 x squared. Then 5 minus 4 is plus x, plus 1, then plus 5. And this becomes your answer. Okay. Alright, you want to just do this step by step. You don't want to skip steps. Okay? Alright, then let's go ahead and do the division. What do you think the division will be? F over G of x, of course, will be f of x over g of x. So in this case, it will be x squared minus x minus 1 over x squared plus 4x minus 5. Let's look at this now and see whether we can simplify. Let's see whether we can factor it. Those two are trinomials, quadratic trinomials. First one, negative 1 times x squared, negative x squared, negative 1. First one, it looks pretty much you cannot factor it. The numerator, you can't factor it. The denominator, negative 5. 5 minus 1, you can factor the denominator. 5 minus 1, but you can't factor the numerator, right? So what you want to do now is you just, you can say that this is x squared minus x minus 1 over x plus 5 times x minus 1. Okay? X squared minus x plus 5x minus 1. Yeah. So if you want, if this becomes your answer, if you can simplify it, you do. If you cannot simplify it, you leave it like that. Yeah. But if you can simplify it, you go ahead and simplify it. Okay, question 4. Question 4. F of x in question 4 is square root of x minus 1, and g of x is square root of x. Alright, let's add it. Now these are radicals. Radicals. This will be square root of x minus 1 plus square root of x. I mean, you can't do anything here. You can't simplify it further, so this becomes your answer. Right? You can't simplify it further. Then, the same thing with subtraction. The difference function, this will be square root of x minus 1 minus square root of x. You can't simplify it further, you leave it. Alright, let's go to the multiplication, the product function. With the product, we see that this will be square root of x minus 1 times square root of x. Is there anything we can do? We can use the law of radicals. When we use the law of radicals, this will be square root of x minus 1 times x, square root of x times x minus 1, so which is square root of x squared minus x. And that's it. We can simplify it for the square root of x squared minus x. Right? Then the quotient function of this will be f divided by g of x is f of x all over g of x. So this will be square root of x minus 1 over square root of x. We don't want to leave it like this. We want to rationalize this. So this will be square root of x minus 1 over square root of x times square root of x over square root of x. So this will be square root of x times x minus 1 over x. And that will be square root of x squared minus x all over x. And this becomes your answer. Okay. Now, the next question is 5, 6, and 7. It gives us three functions now. And it gives us entirely, tells us to find the function of arithmetic functions of the constant, evaluating it for a constant. So for questions 5, 6, 7, it says this: if f of x is x squared minus 16, g of x is 3x, and then h of x is x minus 4. Find number 5 says g minus h of negative 3. Okay, I want to explain something to you. When you have this, something like this, g minus h of -3, you can actually do it two ways, right? You can actually do it two ways, and I'm going to do it two ways. So whichever one you prefer, that's fine. The first method you can use is by definition of function, right? The first method you can use it by definition of function, but with a variable first. You first of all find that g minus h of x. First, the definition of the sum function. And this will be g of x minus h of x. So after getting that, then you can now do that of -3. You can first of all find g minus h of x first. Then you now do g minus h of -3. In that case, you evaluate x to be -3. We have done evaluation of functions. So this will be 3x minus x minus 4. Right? 3x minus x minus parenthesis x minus 4. So this will be 3x minus x plus 4. And that will give you what? 2x plus 4. Okay. Now this is g minus h of x is 2x plus 4. So if you now want to find g minus h of -3, that tells you something. You know what we did evaluating functions, and that reminds me, please, before you view this video, view that video on evaluating functions. So as you can see here, we have found g minus h of x. Now, so g minus h parenthesis of -3 will be, in this case, you substitute for x for -3. Wherever you see x, you replace it with -3. So this will be 2 times -3 plus 4. And that will be -6 plus 4. And that will give you -2. -2 as your answer. Now, if you don't like this, approach, this method, we can do it a second method. Second method is whereby we still use the function method, but we kind of use the vice versa. We kind of use the right hand side of this, right? We know that g minus h of -3 means g of -3 minus h of -3. If you want to do it this way, okay, that is what it means, because g minus h of x is g of x minus h of x. So you can define it straight on like this, right? In this case, we have to find our g of -3, then we also have to find our h of -3, and then we now subtract. Okay, so our g of x is 3x, so our g of -3 will be 3 times -3, which is -9. Okay, then our h of x is x minus 4, so our h of -3 will be -3 minus 4, which is -7. So this will now be, if you now have this from here, this will now be -9 minus, this minus is this minus, minus 7. And that will be -9 plus 7, and that will be -2. So the same answer you get. So whichever method you prefer, that's fine. Okay, all right. Now the next one, this is question 5. The question 6 says f plus g of -1/2. F plus g of -1/2. If we do that with the first method, if we do that with the first method, what do we have? We have that f plus g, first of all we find f plus g of x, and that will give us f of x plus g of x, and that will be x squared minus 16 plus 3x. So this is now x squared plus 3x minus 16. Let's just write it in a descending order of exponents. Descending order of exponents means from greatest to least, 2, 1, 0. Okay? So now we can now find, we see that f plus g of x is x squared plus 3x minus 16. So if we now find f plus g of negative half, this will be negative 1/2 all squared plus 3 times negative 1/2 minus 16. Minus 16. So this will be 1 over 4 minus 3 over 2 minus 16 over 1. So this will be, LCD is 4, 1 over 4 minus, this will be 6 over 4, because you're now dealing with fractions. 6 over 4 is 3, the equivalent fraction is 3 over 2, then minus 64 over 4. 1 minus 6 is what? Minus, now they have the same denominator, so you can work on their numerator. 1 minus 6 is what? Minus 5. Minus 5 minus 64 is minus 69 over 4. You can leave your answer as minus 69 over 4. Now, this, doing these two methods is pretty much good, because your second method might as well act as a check for your first method. You can kind of use your second method to check your first method to see whether you got it, your answer right. Okay, in this, if we use the second method on this, we have that f plus g of negative 1/2 will be f of negative 1/2 plus g of negative 1/2. So let's find f of negative 1/2 and then g of negative 1/2, then we add. So f of x is x squared minus 16. So f of negative half is negative half all squared minus 16. And that will be 1 over 4 minus 16, which is 1 over 4 minus 64 over 4, which is minus 63 over 4. You keep this, minus 63 over 4. Then let's now do the g. G of x is 3x. So g of negative half is 3 times negative half, which is negative 3 over 2. So when we now, if we now add them up, we now have negative 63 over 4 plus negative 3 over 2, and that will give you negative 63 over 4 minus 6 over 4, because they have to be in the same denominator. And this will be minus 69 over 4. And once you get it right, you can drink some tea and join the tea party. Okay, the last but not the least, f divided by h of 3. Of 3. Okay. We use the first method. So this will be f divided by h first of x will be f of x over h of x and this will be x squared minus 16 over x minus 4. And like I told you, you've got to simplify. If you can simplify it, please do simplify it, right? So we see that the numerator is difference of two squares. So this tells you now that you've got to be familiar with factoring. You know, factoring both incomplete forms and complete forms. I did a video, it's a video playlist on factoring for quadratic expressions and equations in complete forms, and also quadratic expressions and equations complete forms. You've got to know it. Yeah. And even you can also you also view the ones on a factoring quadratic, cubic expressions and equations in complete forms, and then cubic expressions and equations complete forms. It's still, the knowledge is still important here. Because as you can see, the numerator here is, we have to factor by difference of two squares. So this will be x squared minus 4 squared over x minus 4, which will be x plus 4 times x minus 4 over x minus 4. So this will cancel out, and the answer will be x plus 4. Right? So now go ahead and now get, so our f divided by h, the quotient function, right, of x will give us x plus 4. So let's go ahead and now do that of 3. So therefore f over h of 3, okay, f over h of x is x plus 4. So f over h of 3 will be 3 plus 4, and that is 7. So our first method we got 7. Let's try it with the second method then. Okay, with the second method, we have that f divided by h of 3 will be f of 3 divided by h of 3. F of 3 divided by h of 3. So first of all, let's find f of x is x squared minus 16. So f of 3 will be 3 squared minus 16, which is a 9 minus 16, which is a negative 7. Then h of x is x minus 4. So h of 3 is 3 minus 4, which is what? Negative 1. So this tells you that f of h of 3 is negative 7 over negative 1. Negative 7 divided by negative 1 gives you 7. 7 with the second method, 7 with the first method. You can do some dancing, you know, that you got it right. Or another thing you can do is you drink some Kool-Aid and form a Kool-Aid party. Okay, you drink some Kool-Aid, just like you drink some tea and join the tea party. Then drink some Kool-Aid and form a Kool-Aid party. Alright, thank you so much today.